Welcome to the Coach's Hot Seat podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to an all-new episode of the Coach's Hot Seat podcast with Mark Haines, the commissioner and publisher of the Coach's Hot Seat. I am your host, Mike Leon. You know, the Coach's Hot Seat is a platform that tracks every FBS coach in America by performance, pressure, and contract reality. Each episode in this series, Mark's going to break down how college football really works, the money, the politics behind it, and the decisions that shape the sport. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the month of December, a pivotal month for coaches. Why is it a pivotal month? Mark's going to break all that down. But you've also got the playoff stretch, how the month has started to really shape coaching careers all across the country. Mark, it's good to see you as always. December tends to sometimes decide a coach's potential future career, where they're going to work at maybe later on, or if they're going to get some type of raise at their current job. What kind of makes the month, in your opinion, different inside some of these athletic departments compared to all the other months in the season?
Well, Mike, it's great to be with you again. December, as you said, is a pivotal month. It's the end of the season. It's where either the team has made the playoffs or they haven't. It used to be either they made a bowl game or they didn't, and a bowl game could save a coach's career. Now with the playoffs, it's a little bit different. So you saw during the season, we had a ton of mid-season firings this year. We had a lot of mid-season coaching searches. We saw coaches' contracts being enhanced so they would stay at their particular school. We saw other coaches where the school didn't step in at all. They just let the coach go. So there's a lot of dynamics, really focusing a lot on the playoffs. And that's almost a shame. If you watch a lot of those bowl games this year, there may not have been anything at stake like a playoff, but there was something at stake for those players. The Cal-Hawaii game comes to mind. It ended in the last minute, and it was an absolutely fantastic game if you watched it. Very entertaining. A lot of players who hadn't played during the season got to play. They got to showcase what they could do. You get kind of a preview about what might be going on next year with the team and some of the players that may be entering the portal now. Critical all the way across for coaches, players, parents, fans, everybody.
Yeah, it's changed for sure. Illinois, Tennessee was a good game. Iowa, Vanderbilt. So a bunch of those good games in the bowl season. Let me ask you though, on the playoff part, because obviously the 12 teams make it, but there are teams that just miss it, right? So how much, in your opinion, I know it's only been a few years since the playoff has been around, but like how much of a coach's fate do you feel like is tied to that playoff picture? If you barely miss it, is it you get a little bit more sympathy, or does it maybe trigger a conversation to kind of move on from that, coach?
Well, it depends. Depends a lot. So if you're new and it's your first year and the expectations maybe aren't as high at your school, they'll say, all right, great, great run. We'll get it next year. If you're, I think of Lincoln Riley in particular at USC, has not made the playoffs yet. And this next year is, either he makes the playoffs or it's bust. If he doesn't make the playoffs, it's a failure for that program. So there's a lot of pressure on him. But if you're at, James Madison had no idea that they were going to make the playoffs, and they did. That was, such a great bonus for that program and for them. If they didn't make it, so what? But they did make it, and it was really special.
Yeah. Let me ask you on another front. You mentioned the mid-season firings, and that kind of was triggered because some of these programs already knew they were out of contention and they're spending so much on these coaches. When you see that happen, especially now the program knows it's out of contention, like we saw with LSU and Brian Kelly, just as an example, how quickly have you seen the internal meetings start shifting now where it's like, yeah, we still want to win Saturday, but now we got to figure out who's next to be the coach here?
Well, the James Franklin situation at Penn State was really pretty stark. That was a seat of the pants decision. Obviously, there was not a lot of thought put into it. So that shifted really, really quickly. At the beginning of the season, you didn't expect to see James Franklin fired at Penn State. That was not one of the names on the hot seat list. It definitely was not something that people thought would happen. As a matter of fact, they thought the other way, that they could be a potential national champion. And as things fell apart, the tide turned really quickly. There was the UCLA loss, and then there was a Northwestern loss, and then the next thing you know, he's gone. So it's changed things so that it moves really fast. Brian Kelly was another one. Well, that one had a little more runway. You could see a little more of the writing on the wall. I'm not sure that Brian Kelly was a great fit there. And there were reports that he might be a little tired. Like he wasn't working the way that Brian Kelly normally worked, at Cincinnati or at Notre Dame, where he was on. He was spent a little bit more time on the golf course, and that seemed to anger the Louisiana State fan base. They wanted him to be the same guy that he had always been. So that one had a little more writing on the wall, and you could kind of see that one developing. But the James Franklin one was a complete surprise.
Complete surprise. You can't spend that much time at the course, Brian. I know we all got to work on our golf game, right? Mark, let me ask you, you just mentioned about the bowl games, how they used to save coaching jobs, right? Just get to 6-6, and that kind of buys you an extra year. But because they've become afterthoughts, especially for the Power 4 schools, and maybe some of the Group of 5 schools, have the bowls now, has that just completely lost the power to change a coach's future?
That's a really good question. The bowl games, according to national media and some fan bases, have lost their luster, and I'm not sure that they have. I think that you can make a case for that. A coach can showcase maybe what he's thinking about doing in the next season, and particularly if he's been there a year or 2 years, he can kind of show the direction of the program. There's an emphasis on winning the national championship. And really this 12 seed playoff was really designed so that you didn't leave one of the top 4 out or the top 5 out. It wasn't meant for number 12. And if number 12 all of a sudden showed up and won, that would be, really great, or really, it would be a great story. But I don't think you're going to see that. It's really so that the top 4 or 5 schools we make sure that those schools are the right ones and that they're in. So, you're looking at the bowl games, maybe somebody just missed. They missed the top. They were number 13 or they're number 14. It's a great chance for you to play and show that you deserve to be there. And I think that's the way we should be thinking about them. There's a lot of opt-outs now, so you're not necessarily seeing your team. And that's, I think, something that needs to get addressed. But I don't think we should diminish the bowl games at all. I think they're a really great way to end the season for a lot of programs.
Yeah, we're going to get into the roster turnover in just a second. I did want to ask you, though, because that's in a real world, Mark. Unfortunately, we don't live in the real world, because these Power 4 schools, I mean, just Nebraska is an example on how much money they spend. The boosters there love a winner, and 7-5 is not a winner. I mean, ask Bo Pelini, right? So what do you usually see from donors and the money people at these schools when, not only is the playoff just missed, but the playoffs completely missed, like a Nebraska?
I'm going to bring in Colorado, because you're starting to see it there with the donors. They have donor fatigue. And what they're starting to say is they're all in on Coach Prime. They love the energy that he's brought and the attention that he's brought to the program. They're not in on the lack of loyalty from the players. So if I'm going to invest in a player, I want him to be a Colorado Buffalo next year and the year after. And I want him to graduate, and I want him to come back. And that's not what you're seeing there. And the boosters there it's the first group of boosters that are starting to push back and say, look, that guy's not going to be here next year. I'm not investing in him. I think you're going to see that a lot more from a program like Nebraska, where it's 7-5. And, with Dylan Raiola as the quarterback who was supposed to lead them on, it appears that Matt Rule may have decided that he wanted to go in a different direction, and Dylan is out. Well, where's the competition makes you better. Where is that competition, and what does it say about developing the players? And do you have a chance to do that now? And can you really coach somebody up, or are you managing contracts and egos?
Yeah. Speaking of managing contracts, we get to my favorite subject here. Obviously, we mentioned mid-season firings, a little bit of abnormalities there across the board, but others are starting to do extensions, which I think are ridiculous in nature in terms of how long they're extending these coaches. What are some of the things that you've been seeing behind the scenes right now that are happening, not only at the schools that just missed the playoffs or the playoff contenders? We're seeing it with Ole Miss and things like that, but like, what are you seeing with some of these other schools that are giving some of these extensions and then regretting it later on?
So, there's no one, it really hasn't settled down to that there's a one set of patterns that you start to see. It's kind of all over the place. So you'll see a lot of back channel interest from between, a school and an agent, or a coach will have the agent float his name for a job. And that's signaling to the school that, hey, look, I might not be really happy here. Right. And so they'll either step in or they won't. And you saw that a couple cases this year where all of a sudden names were floated out of nowhere. Well, there wasn't genuine interest in necessarily in that particular job. They're signaling to the school that I'm not happy. So then you start to see, the athletic director start to make some moves, and they might be financial. There might be some other stuff going on.
Mark, as we put a bow on this episode and you look at this year's landscape, which coaches, in your estimation, especially now that the playoffs are almost over as of this recording, which ones are starting to walk into December on borrowed time? Which ones are starting to potentially lock up new deals going forward?
So I think, Mike Norvell at Florida State, that's a situation that is, it's deteriorating by the day. They're not doing well in the portal. There's a lot of portal activity that is negative for them. The culture is not where it needs to be. And I think that the powers that be at Florida State know that Mike Norvell's not the right guy for the job, but they are kind of, financially impacted, and they really can't do anything about it. So that's the most glaring example that I can see, right now. There's some stuff at Middle Tennessee with Derek Mason. You're starting to hear a little bit of noise there. Bill Belichick, we'll wait to see. That's still a work in progress. It's going to depend on, how he works with his assistants and how that gels. I think a lot of players went there thinking they were going to be developed into an NFL caliber player. So that's kind of a work in progress and remains to be seen. A couple of the other ones that are, in the background, Matt Rule at Nebraska. You brought up Nebraska earlier. Matt Rule at Nebraska is one that we've got an eye on. Lincoln Riley is the other one that we've really got an eye on. There are a lot of Trojan fans who have had it with Lincoln Riley. They don't think he can do it. They don't think that and there are others who think, we're really close, but it's been really close every single year. And so we get to this point in the year and people talk themselves into that it's really close. There's a group of fans now saying, no, he either makes the playoffs or that's it. So those are the ones that we really are watching, particularly those three, the Mike Norvell, Matt Rule, and Lincoln Riley would be the three that we're really watching right now.
Either way, I'll be watching along with you as a fan of a Big Ten school. Mark, I can't thank you enough for hopping on and giving us all this time and breaking this all down. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
That's it for today's episode of the Coach's Hot Seat podcast. If you want to follow Mark's latest rankings and the full analysis of every FBS program, including mine at Rutgers University, where my coach is getting overpaid, visit coacheshotseat.com. Thank you for listening, but don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review and comment, or share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. As always, I'm Mike Leon. See everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.